Before we hop into this episode, I have one favor to ask of you. If you've got any kind of information or inspiration from this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you hit the subscribe button. Just like most podcasts out there are more people that watch this show that are not subscribed than that are subscribed. And so if you want to help me get bigger and better guests for this show as we go along, and I hope you do stick along, it would mean the world to me to hit that subscribe button so that we can make it happen. Thank you. Let's get into the interview. What do you think, from your experience of working with men, what do you think the biggest struggle men are dealing with today?
Society it's difficult to navigate right now, man. You have a lot of mixed messages that I think do a disservice to men. Men are taught that they're less valuable than ever, that they don't have, women are trying to be fed this lie essentially that they don't need men, which is the destruction of family and society itself. And men need women and women need men. It's the polarity of the universe. It's not an accident. Like the very earth itself runs on polarity, and so do relationships and society. And so, I think that men are having a harder time than ever finding their value to the world. I think in days past, right, it was very obvious, like women stayed home and took care of the families and things like that. And the men went out and worked and created value. I'm not saying that was the right way to do it. I'm just saying it was much easier for men in that kind of a society for them to find their purpose. They knew if they went, worked hard, supported, created safety and stability for their family, then they would feel good about themselves. And I think anytime that you strip a human being of that purpose that they're driven to find, it makes it more difficult for them to find fulfillment and happiness. And so you got a lot of guys that are kind of floundering. They're trying to figure out like, well, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Who even depends on me? Who needs me? And how can I help other people? And if you haven't really done the work to search for that and find those answers, you start finding a lot of false purposes that maybe don't satisfy you or fulfill you. And so a lot of guys get sucked into this world of sports and entertainment and, politics and just things that don't truly have a whole lot of value. And, but it helps them feel connected. And so they put a lot of time and attention there. But I think that's the main thing that's going on right now. And so, it's more than ever, I think you have to really be very intentional about where you're putting your energy as a man to make sure that you're helping create those scenarios and situations where you're going to feel like a high value man and have a lot of purpose.
When men come to work with you, what do you think that they're looking for that they aren't even aware of that they're looking for? Of course, there's friendship, but there's so much more depth to your work that they may not even be aware of.
Yeah, a lot of guys will join my program and they say, this is the program I never knew that I needed all along. And what they're referring to, I think, in a lot of situations is people don't even know why they feel disconnected to other human beings. They don't know why. They have people in their life. They go to work. They have maybe some friends that, have some surface level of relationships with, and they don't even know what it is, but it's because they're not being seen. And so what I try to do is help men specifically to be seen and to be able to really shed those masks that we all carry, whether it's the mask of success or of accomplishment or mask of, achievement, humor, sexuality, all these different ones that we wear. And when men really get seen for the first time and they get loved in that state, then they will never forget the people that love them under those conditions. And so what I try to do and what I try to help men do specifically is to be able to feel seen and be seen for the first time. And when that happens, a drastic change happens in their life and they feel connected like they never have before. Because what happens is when we're wearing these masks, we don't even know we're doing it, but we're showing a version of ourselves to others that we hope they accept. But even if they do accept it, we're deep down subconsciously, we know that they're only accepting that version that we gave them, not our full selves. So we can't truly feel the love that's being poured into us. It's like a bucket that has holes in it. And so when we take those masks off and we let ourselves be a little vulnerable, we let ourselves, show the sides of us that maybe aren't so pretty, and we're loved in that state, then all of a sudden we go, oh my gosh, I'm just lovable and I can be loved. And so they feel loved, a lot of them, and are seeing a lot of them for the first time in their lives.
Most people really don't have that place of for them to be vulnerable and share their fears, share what they're grateful for, what they are grateful for about themselves, their accomplishments, everything in between. And there was growing up, your dad had told you something that you wrote on a hat of yours that stuck with you for such a long time. And I think most people live through that idea of I'm not good enough. And it was kind of like a mentality that you took on in your life. When was the first time when you recognized that that wasn't the approach that you wanted to take and that you needed that love and transparency for yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting because almost every single guy that joins my program has the same lie they tell themselves. They say, if people knew who I really was, they wouldn't love me. Right. And we all have this fear of not being enough or not being loved. It's actually, I learned this at a Tony Robbins event, but the two biggest fears that every human being has is that I'm not lovable and I'm not good enough. For me, when I was in 8th grade, my dad, I had an older brother that was the star MVP of the state in baseball for 2 years in a row, ended up playing college ball, my dad's favorite university. I mean, it was like, he got a lot of significance out of that. And, he wanted me to have that same experience, and he saw how much it meant to me. Baseball meant to me. And so he was trying to help me, but he wanted me to get held back a grade in school when I was in 8th grade so that I could be a star athlete. And I wasn't that good. I mean, I was a decent high school baseball player, basically. And it was interesting because he put a lot of pressure on me to do it. He'd heard of some other people across town that had done this, and they, ended up becoming star players and everything else. And eventually I told him, he was like, hey, you got to make a decision if you're going to do this. And I told him, I said, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to stay in the grade I'm in. I was a pretty smart kid. I had good friends that age. I had a crush that age. I just didn't want to get held back. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, okay, well, just so you know, you'll never play baseball again. You're not good enough. And all I heard, my 14-year-old brain heard is you're not good enough. And so I went on this mission to basically prove him wrong. And so I wrote under my hat. It was my baseball hat that I wore every single day for the next 4 years that said, you're not good enough. And I hadn't thought of that like in 15, 20 years, right? But like, I know the power of words and affirmations and all these things that we tell ourselves now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, I literally told myself that I'm not good enough. And I basically pounded that in my head for 4 years straight. And so I lived my life, my whole teens, 20s, and most of my 30s, living this lie of, hey, I'm not good enough. And so I would do a lot of behaviors that was trying to prove myself. And I can look back now and give that kid empathy, because it's like, how it came off was like, look how cool I am. Look at my stuff. Look how successful I am. Look at these girls I'm with. But what it was really all I was trying to say underneath was, hey, somebody please love me. I promise I'm good enough. And we all do this, right? And so for me, I hadn't thought of that in, again, almost 20 years. And I was having a really beautiful experience one night with some close friends. And I saw like my hat that I wore. And as an adult that coaches people and has been studying all this for the last 15 years, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I realized it. And this voice came to me. I don't know what to call it, like a download. It wasn't like there was a human or anything, but it was like, hey, Jimmy, this has served you, but it no longer does. It's time to let it go. And in that moment, I knew exactly that I needed to let that go. And I was able to go through this process and kind of release my dad from that experience and myself. And it was really beautiful. It kind of started for me this journey of just loving myself and knowing that I am enough. And it was really difficult. And it's still, I still have moments where I'm like, I'm trying to get validated. I'm trying to prove myself. And it's always in all of us, but it's like, I'm very aware of it now. And so in that, I'm able to try to, get that love from within, as opposed to trying to get it from external sources, which will never help you feel down. I mean, I was, I remember one time I went on a date, took her to a college football game during the day, posted it on Facebook. That night I took a different girl to the rodeo and posted it on Facebook. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And I was just trying to get validated as much as I could and let people see that I was okay or that I was enough. And I look back now and again, it's like, I kind of cringe a little bit because I know that, how that probably looked to people that can see through it. But it was, it was a really beautiful experience that helped me understand other men and this plight that we all go through. That's like, hey, because I've been to so many of these events and masterminds and conferences, seminars, coaching programs, and all these things. And it was cool because every time I'd show up, I hated how surface it was and how everybody would brag at the beginning. And so in my program, I was able to take my own experience and be like, well, I don't want people to feel like they have to prove themselves. And so the very first night we all get together, it's the very first thing we do in my program. I have everybody write a list of the 50 things that make them a badass. And then we read it out loud and we celebrate the person like they just won the Super Bowl. And it's a really cool experience because what it does is it helps every single person realize that they're good enough and they don't have to front. Nobody's bragging about their cars or their business or their success. We're all just in this thing together. And it's a way for me to use, the pain that I had or my own experience to help other men be able to break through that. So it's been a really cool thing in that way.
Yeah, it's funny how we have this adverse idea of wanting to be seen, yet also not wanting to be seen in the same sense. We have like a fear of being seen, yet when we feel seen and appreciated and vulnerable and we have that space, it's one of the most powerful things that we can do to really transform our internal life, not just our external.
Well, and the reason we don't want to be seen is because it's not scary if somebody rejects the version of me I'm showing. Like if I'm showing you a version of me and I know it's not me. So it's like if you reject that, oh my God, they're just rejecting what I'm showing them. But if I show you me and you reject that, that's going to hurt. And so that's why it's so scary to be seen.
Shame is one of these things that for most people, it seems like it's the driver in their life, and especially for a lot of successful people at that as well, where it drives them to such an extreme extent where you realize that no matter what you accomplish in the external, it's never going to fill the void that you're looking for internally. I think for real estate, for you, $32 million home, one of the best real estate agents in where you were going. And I think it was one of those things where for you, you realized it wasn't going to fill the void you were looking for, and you stepped into this work. What was it like leaving a job, making millions a year, having all the notoriety, everything that you thought you were looking for, and then leaving that and then stepping into something that filled you with a lot more fulfillment?
Yeah, you're referring to when I left real estate and started We Are the They, because I really at the peak of my career took this complete left turn and just did something completely different, right? And anybody that's done real estate knows that the first 5 years are by far the hardest. The next 5 are really difficult. And then it actually gets pretty easy. I had a database of 1,800 past clients. I had all these thousands of people I was marketing to. I was basically just taking orders and helping. I mean, I sold my last full year as a realtor. I sold 497 houses with 3 agents on my team. I mean, we were, you're making several $1 million a year doing it. And you alluded to, there was a day, it was actually almost 5 years ago exactly, or no, 6 years ago now. I sold the most expensive home ever in Utah. And it was a $32.5 million property. And at that point, it was awesome, but like, it was a normal day and it didn't really do anything that like moved the needle. I didn't feel like I was making the difference that I could. And I started seeing just all the problems in the world. I started seeing, COVID hadn't happened yet, but there was still this like disconnect from social media and just the world that was evolving around us where, people weren't, I don't know, they just didn't feel like they had these communities like maybe they used to. I'm in Utah where there's a lot of people that you're either in the LDS church or you're out of it. And it just was a disconnect in the community. And I was like, what if I could create a place where people don't give a shit, where we can all just kind of come together and focus on being good humans? And so I saw this need and I started just kind of playing with the thought of like, well, what if I didn't do real estate? It was a scary question, man. I remember when first time I presented that to one of my mentors and they're like, maybe sit on this for a minute. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. I was like, what would I do if I didn't do real estate? How could I have a greater impact? And about that same time, there was a real estate agent that I was friends with. They got shot and killed collecting the rent at one of his properties. And he had 7 kids, but like every story in the paper was just like realtor shot, realtor gets killed, realtor this. And I'm like, if I died tomorrow and every article in the paper was just about me being a realtor, I was like, I just feel like it would be missing a lot of like who I am, And so I started playing with these ideas, man. And I started listening to the messages I was getting on Instagram. I'd get a lot of guys would reach out to me and they were all kind of saying the same thing. They're like, hey, man, they'd say stuff like, I don't know where to find friends like you guys have. How do I find a group of friends like yours? You guys seem to really love each other and care for each other and are helping each other all the time. And I started realizing like, I've taken this for granted that I just have these amazing friends. I really do have like the best friends in the world. And I thought, what if I could teach other guys how to connect on this deeper level? I had sacrificed or put off being in romantic relationships a lot for the sake of, creating a really strong friend group and doing some amazing things with them. But, it was a gift and a blessing because I learned a lot of really valuable things on how to be a good friend and how to connect with other guys. And so I started leaning into that and I said, you know what, maybe this is the thing that I could do to help make a bigger difference in the world. And so I just went full in like I do with anything. I went all out and I said, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this and see if I can help men connect and form these communities. And so I formed what became We Are the They, and we're going on 3 years now. And it's been amazing, man. It's got, one of the guys are getting together every single day. There's a group of 10 guys that are going to climb Mount Timpanogos, the biggest peak in Utah this week. And there's, one of the guys is getting married on Friday or on Saturday to a woman that he met through the program, through another guy. And it's every single day these things are happening because of the group. Yesterday, we had a business networking event where 45 guys from the group got together and shared referrals and connections and things like that. And so every single day we got these amazing things happening because of this community. And it's been really awesome, man. It's, I saw this need, and I think a lot of men don't know where to turn to just get good information right now. You can't go to the news. You can't go to social media. And so I just decided it's like, hey, no one else is going to do this. I'll do it. And that's what I've been doing with it ever since.
So you've heard the quote, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself most with, right? Well, that's more true than you could possibly imagine. And what if those 5 people were a human lie detector, an FBI negotiator, an ex-CIA spy, a billionaire, and everything in between? Well, that's exactly what I've been able to do with my podcast over these past few years. From starting in my car with no money, no experience, no following, not even a microphone, and now I'm collaborating with some of the most profound individuals in the world. And it's because of 2 simple things: crafting the perfect pitch so that when the person sees the message, they are open to actually entertaining the opportunity of speaking with you. And number 2, finding a way to get that pitch seen to begin with so that you actually can get in that room. And if you want to learn the skills and how I've been able to get the guests that I've been able to get in my show without any kind of audience or experience, the link in the description will be there for Get Your Guest, my course, and how I've been able to collaborate and connect with some profound individuals and show you how you can too. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think the sunken cost fallacy puts so many people in a place of just stagnation, just staying in what they're doing, even if they know that it's not the thing that they would really feel in most alignment to do. And like you said, real estate was getting to the phase of your career when it was probably going to get easier as the years went on because you've built up so much over these past few years. Leaving that, stepping into what you do today, I know that after, an amazing career in real estate, you probably had a lot of confidence to leave and step into something new. There's imposter syndrome for anyone that leaves their career, but what were some of the things that you had to overcome when you left your career and then stepping into this?
The first one was, there's this thought, right? Like, okay, who am I to teach other men like how to do stuff? And there's this imposter syndrome that comes over us. But then I start thinking, you know what? I'm not going to teach anything that I don't know. I'm just going to teach the stuff that I've learned. And I realized, like, there's pieces of my life that I absolutely, there's people that know much better than me. So like a lot of business stuff, a lot of stuff with relationships, romantic relationships and things like that. So what I did is I bring in all these best experts in the world to help me. And so I stay in my lane and I teach the things I'm really good at. I build community. I build these safe containers for men to do their own healing. One of my philosophies is we can't change anybody. All our job is to do as a coach is to create a container safe enough for people to be inspired to change themselves. And that I know how to do really well. And so I said, once I realized that, I'm like, okay. And so, like we have a call this Tuesday coming up and I have Sadia Khan coming on. If you know that, she's like the top person on the internet right now, helping people with relationships. So rather than me come on and tell these men how to, be a better husband or boyfriend, I'm just going to have her do it. And, I've had Ed Milet and Andy Frisella and Chris Williams and all these amazing people come speak to my group. And I've literally had probably 60 guest speakers, the who's who of, people that are teaching this stuff and speaking about it. And so I think that's been the hardest thing for me at the beginning, was just going, who am I to teach this stuff? But it's funny when you step into it, you realize like, oh, I forgot how much I've learned. Like I've ran one of the top real estate businesses for 20 years in the entire country. I've been, I've coached with all these amazing humans. I've read 1,000 books. Like I've really done a lot of things to try to learn and just stepping into that because, one of my mentors and somebody that coached me one-on-one is Ed Milet. And, it was interesting because with Ed, he said, all of the people you see actually doing the thing, the people on stages, the people that look like they're the most successful, they've just simply learned, like, they don't know what they're doing any more than anybody else. They're just simply willing to take action, not knowing if it's going to work. And that is the best advice I ever got. And so I think what I'm really good at is just being willing to try. I'm willing to fail. And I think that's the key, man. I think it's like, and so for most people, they're so afraid of looking stupid or failing. And it's funny, one of my guys gave me a huge compliment about 3 weeks ago. He said, Jimmy, my favorite thing about your program, he's like, you're not afraid to try anything, but if it doesn't work, he goes, you're not attached to the idea, even though it was your idea. You'll just drop it and go do something else. It's like I'm constantly trying to get this right. I'm constantly trying to make this better. And so I don't need it to be right. I just want it to, I don't need to be right. I just want to get this thing right. And in that, there's a lot of power, man.
Yeah, what I think a lot of people may not know about you is you had a TV show, you sold meat door to door, you had Christmas light business. Like you had things that financially weren't successful, but even the act of doing it, people saw it as a success because most people don't have the courage to take that leap to do it to begin with, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. And so, yeah, it was cool. I noticed like very early on, I'm like, oh, even when these things don't work, I'm like, I'm getting a lot of accolades from other people because they're like, shit, this guy's willing to put himself out there. And the win wasn't whether or not I made a ton of money. Like even the things that you just referred to, like most of those didn't make, from a financial standpoint, they were not successful. But I met every business owner in town. I made friends with all these different people. I had all these connections. I put myself out there. I learned so much about myself, and it really helped me become who I am today. And so, there's just been all of these experiences have really created who I get to be today. And so there was no failures and all that. They were all successes, even though financially a lot of them ended up being a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you've invested in Tony Robbins. Ed Milet was a one-on-one coach. Neil Strauss, one-on-one coach as well. Like you've worked with some really profound people, not only just, through the podcast, connecting with them, but one-on-one. What are some of the things that you've noticed within those people that you've practiced and instilled into yourself?
Yeah, each one, there's different takeaways. I'm currently working with Sadia right now. And, and I have, and it's not just people that like, they have the biggest names on the internet. I try to find people that are where I want to be. And I try to get around them as much as possible. Who is where I am today, who used to be where I am today that is where I want to go. And I say, okay, I'm going to find out what they did and kind of just copy the roadmap. And Ed gave me the best compliment he ever gave me. It was in front of about 10 of his students he was coaching at the time. And he pointed at me and he spoke to the rest of them. And he said, if I could get all of you to just do what I'm asking you to do the way that Jimmy does, every single one of you would change your entire lives. And that's the truth. It's like, if I'm going to hire one of these people, I'm going to do what they ask me to do. And so I think that's one thing that I do really well is just take in whatever it is. So like with Neil Strauss, the dude is brilliant at communicating, right? Asking better questions. Ed is a master at helping you feel important. And so I'm watching each one of these guys. It's not so much, I couldn't tell you specifics they gave me about my life or my situation. I mean, I know which stuff they advised me to do and things, but what I was doing is observing them and the way that they made me feel. Neil was really good at just being interested and curious and wanting to know more. And, he was very good at being unattached to outcomes. Like, it's one of the problems I've had in my coaching program I'm working on is not needing it to be exactly how I have it pictured in my head. And Neil just let the thing be. It just would always be what it needed to be. And in his mind, it was perfect. I was like, oh, this is a superpower. And with Ed, he does this thing where he says, let me tell you about you. And what he does is he'll just pour into you and he'll tell you something that you know to be true about yourself that maybe people forget to tell you. And in that, it's true when you hear it. And so you're, God, this guy sees me. And so people feel seen by him. That's his superpower. It's like, I could do it to you right now. Like, dude, I've been on a lot of these podcasts. Very few of the guests have done the research the way that you have. And I really honor that. I can tell why you're crushing it at this because you've taken it so serious. And you're really good. You're better than 99% of the guys that I've interviewed with. I'm not joking, because I can tell how much you research and how much you care. And so it makes me want to help you in the future and want to connect more to you. And as I'm telling you this right now, you're starting to smile because this is true about yourself. You know that you've done this and you're like, oh, wow, it's cool to be like appreciated. And so that's what Ed does so well. Like he can tell you things about you that are true. And you're like, shit, all right, that's cool. And so those are different things from each person, man. Sadia is brilliant at helping me understand relationships more. I coached with a guy named Stefanos Safandos that he helped me tap into just asking better questions too. And to be honest, that's the one thing I would say with all these coaches, the best ones are really good at asking the right question. It's like the old principle, right? Like you can hire, if something's wrong with your car, or I think there's a story of, it's like a metaphor story, but like, this company had this really expensive machine and it wasn't working and they hired the repair guy to come fix it. And he quoted him $2,000 and they said, okay. He moved one screw and it started working again. They said, hey, we're not going to pay you $2,000, to move one screw. That doesn't seem fair. And he said, well, you paid me maybe $1 to move the screw for my time, but you paid me $1,999 to know which screw to move. And that's all the work I've done for the last 15, 20 years, right? And so in that it's a really good story because it really goes to show that, like, look, it's that one question, it's that one little thing that a great coach will be able to show you that no one else ever has. And Stefanos did that for me. He was able to ask me one question, unlock this whole thing for me that started me down this path of healing. And so it's, I try to get around really smart people, man. People that inspire me. That's the best way I can put it. So I ask people, like, who do you want to be your mentor? And you don't have to hire them. They all have books and videos and courses and YouTube. And like, there's enough free information that anybody can be your mentor. Now, are they going to be able to really understand you one-on-one? No. And that's where you want to build up to that. But I'll tell you a quick story. It's happened to me about an hour and a half ago. I was at the gym and I haven't even changed yet. And I'm working out. This is why I do all the stuff that I'm doing. Okay. And so I'm sitting there working out. And this kid comes up to me at the gym. He says, "Hey, man, just want to say I see you on Instagram. Really cool to see you at the gym." I said, "Oh, right on, man. What's your name? What do you do?" I try to always give people a minute. And he's like, "Well, I go to UVU. I'm studying data science." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you want to do with that? You want to be like an engineer?" He's like, "No, I really want to go into data collection and things like that." I was like, "Oh, that's cool. How's it going?" He's like, "Well, not good. And he knew me. A friend of his is in my program. So his buddy Jonah it's his buddy's older brother, Jonah, is in my program." And so I just talked to him for a minute. And I was like, "Well, that seems like a hard thing to get into." He's like, "It is." And now I happen to have a buddy from junior high that also has been on my podcast that is like known as the data expert dude in the world. He trains all over the world. He's in Germany and Dubai and everything else. I said, "Bro, let me help you out. Here, I got this buddy." And I told him who he was, what he does. I put him on a text. And the dude already had texted back since we've been doing the call. They're connecting. And he's like, the dude's sitting there at the machine next to me after I connected him. And he's like, "Bro, like, how often do you do this?" And I just like, "How often do you connect people like this?" I said, "Whenever I can." And it was just cool, man. This was a kid who's been really frustrated and has no idea where to turn to get some kind of job or career intern in this field. And I literally just connected him to the guy that's known as, literally, if you Google him, it's like the godfather of data collection. And so who knows where that goes, but it was cool. It took me a minute and a half out of my day to do it. But it was a relationship I've been building since I was 14 years old, So anyway, that's why I talk to people and go, that's what makes it fun to do all this stuff is like this wedding on Saturday, like I'm going to be an emotional mess. I'm like getting emotional right now because this kid, when he joined my program, he hadn't ever had a girlfriend. I don't think he'd ever had a kiss. And he's just like the best dude and just wanted to find a woman. And one of the guys in the program like recognized how good of a guy he is. And he said, "Hey man, I got this girl and I don't think anybody's ever been worthy of her. And so I've never connected anybody with her, but I think you are, Andy." They go on a date, and this is a little over a year ago, and they're getting married on Saturday, dude. And it's like, that kind of stuff means a lot to me because, in your life, dude, you're like, you take these big risks and these big chances. And me starting this program was a big one. And I gave up a lot financially, to be honest, to do it. And so when I have experiences like that, I'm so grateful for it because it's so much bigger than anything I was doing for myself. And it means so much more to me. And this is a daily thing in my life, dude. Like this happens almost every day. I'm able to help somebody in some way connect and because of the effort that I've been putting in. And so that's what makes it fun to do it.
Man, it's an amazing to hear your story. When I was doing research for the podcast, I realized how similar our journeys have kind of been because I realized after I graduated high school, I didn't want to have a normal job. Thought real estate was going to be the thing for me. Got in tune with the team, did everything, took all the tests, all the stuff. And then right when I was about to turn 18 to actually take the test to become an agent, I realized it wasn't for me. And then I hired my first coach that same week, invested more money than I had. And I realized something that you were speaking about is like what Ed does is what I think a coach does so well is they help you believe in yourself more than you believe in you, or they help you see something in you that maybe you can't see in yourself or you need to be reminded of. And my first coach told me that it wasn't that I needed to have all of the answers, but rather I needed to have the right questions to lead people to their own answers. And from your books, or at least from a lot of the people that I've had on the podcast that have written books, the book that they get the most from isn't the one that they read, but it's the one that they write. You've written 2 now, and both are really hand in hand with the message that you're trying to leave. What have you learned about yourself through writing your books?
Yeah, man. They say you write a book a lot of the material in there, I need to hear more than anybody. The one thing that I've always tried to really make very clear is that like, I don't have this shit figured out. I'm just the guy that's in the arena fighting and trying to figure it out and trying to do better and trying to, make it, and reading the book. And I have my things, man, and I still fall short all the time. And I'll think to myself like, damn, like I didn't do that very well, or I could have done that a lot better, or just different things like that. And so for me, I tried to, I think doing those books was really helpful just to help me understand a little bit more about myself and see my own, my own challenges. Are there things that I got to work on? And so reading the book, I re-listen to my book all the time, or people will read parts of it or whatever else. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to remember that next time. Like, and so I think those books are written. When we write a book, we write it as much as for anybody as for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You've done a lot of really cool experiences with the people that you've worked with, not just, naming 50 things that are great about them, but, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with Jason Kelsey, Chris Long, some amazing people. Like you said, you've been able to connect with some really profound people. Is there a experience that has really been instilled within you that you remember most or has impacted you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, like connecting people and, the networking game and everything like that. And again, it's not so much for like, oh, look at, I met Jason Kelsey or whatever else, and we hiked Kilimanjaro together. Here's where it matters. On that hike as well was Haloti Ngata, who will be an NFL Hall of Famer, played for the Ravens for a dozen years, and he lives here in Utah. And, I did a Father's Day event for my guys about a little over a year ago. And Haloti came and spoke at it. His dad died when he was a freshman at University of Oregon. And Haloti came and spoke to my group. And dude just was breaking down and talking about the importance of fathers and the role. And, he's got his 4 kids. And it was like a life-changing moment for the 100 guys that were there. That's why that was a cool moment for me to go climb with Haloti so that I could call it back, right? And like, I'll give you an example of one that happened a long time ago. But so Kyle Van Noy, he's a middle linebacker right now for the Ravens. He's probably the best defensive football player to ever play at BYU, which is the local university here in Utah. And he and I became really close friends when he was in college. I did a charity date auction and I connected him to his wife that night. She was Miss Utah. He was the star football player at the college, and they met, left together that night, and rode off into the sunset basically. So, but he and I have really been really close. And it's funny, he's, of all my friends, he's probably the dude that checks in on me the most, just because like that's kind of guy he is. But I remember when he was a senior at BYU, and he'd had some injuries, some different things that had happened. But he was a buddy of mine, owns a day spa here, and his name's Tyler. He's my business partner for real estate now. And but he owned a big spa with a bunch of ladies that worked there. And one of the ladies' daughter had broke her femur her sophomore year of high school. It's like a 9-month recovery. She was laid up for most of it. And they just found out that day the femur had grown back wrong, and they were going to have to re-break it and set it again. You can imagine the devastation of this 15-year-old girl, right?
Yeah. So
he hits me up and he just goes, dude, he tells me the situation. He says, her favorite thing is BYU football. All-time favorite player is Kyle. I know you guys are friends. Like, any chance you could get him to just maybe text or like hold up a sign telling her to get well soon? And I said, dude, let me call Kyle and see, And so I call Kyle and I just go, dude, here's what's going on. And he said, well, where does she live? And it was about an hour away. It was a place called Eagle Mountain. He's like, let's go. And so we go out there, and, Kyle spends like 2 hours with this girl and their family and just loving them and trying to help them feel better. And, and it's like, my buddy hits me up afterwards. He's like, dude, like, be able to do that for this person in my work. And it still makes me emotional, because like Kyle's one of those dudes that just is so doing those things all the time. But it's like, this is where the impact matters. Those things will change your life. Those experiences will change your life. And so, when anytime I'm speaking on these big stages and stuff, I always say to the audience, I'm like, the only reason to do everything I'm doing is so that you can do those things, so you can have those experiences and change lives, the one person at a time. And so that's the stuff that really motivates me and keeps me pushing as hard as possible, man. Is it's really beautiful way to live, and it's a really fun thing to do, just to make a little difference. So like all these connections and the networking and all that, yeah, I love to do it. And I've had 610 episodes of my podcast now. Just in the last week, I interviewed the founder of Tinder and the founder of Foursquare, and Ricky Williams, Robert Griffin III, a couple of Heisman Trophy winners. Like, I can get some amazing guests. I can name drop all day. But the whole point of all that is like I end up becoming friends with these guys because, like you, I prepare for the podcast. Like the dude that founded Foursquare, he's been texting me and emailing me since, and just like he's just really impressed with the interview, and we'll be friends. And I don't know if anything ever comes of that, but someday we're down the line, somebody might need a help or a connection, and so doing that podcast might be the thing that changes somebody's entire life or job or whatever else. And so that gets me pumped, dude, and that's why doing the podcast is so fun for me, and being able to have those connections to other human beings.
Yeah, man, it really is an infinite game. Humans, I never get sick of speaking to someone new and like really diving into everything of their journey. I find it really difficult to not want to listen to every single podcast that you've ever been on and dive into all your books and dive deep into your work. I find it fascinating.
Thank you.
And I think one of the cool things about the podcast is that I'm able to learn from people that are ahead of me just without coaching in a way, but also learn from their own mistakes. And I'm curious for you, is there something that you've spent a lot of time on in the beginning of your career that you think me or my audience should skip entirely? Maybe that's mental space or actually something that you did.
That's such a good question, man. Something you guys should skip. Shit, that's a good question, man. One of the things I think people think they should skip, I'm going to change this question because nothing's
Take
coming
it away.
to me. But something that one of my first mentors was a guy named Mike Ferry. And I remember when I was in high school and I was always like, why am I learning this or that or whatever this stupid thing is? It doesn't matter. And the truth is I actually completely disagree with that now. Versatility, he used to teach that versatility is the number one quality you can have that'll help you the most in life. And I never truly understood it until these last couple of years, but he would talk about, if you're big into sports, don't always go to the football game, go to the symphony, go to a play. Don't always go to Disneyland for your vacation. Maybe go to Montana or go to Texas or Florida or something and just go and experience life in these different ways. And it's been really cool. So I've really dove into versatility. I've been to 112 countries now, and it's cool, man. Like, just the other day, was hanging out and trying to connect with some people. And in fact, it was when I was doing the podcast with RG3 with Robert Griffin III. Well, his wife is from Estonia. And I've been there. I went to Estonia a couple of years ago on a cruise. And so me and her start jamming about Estonia. And I just saw both of them change from like, all right, who's this dude that's interviewing me on the podcast to like, oh, this guy's cool. And we connected, and he follows me on Instagram and Twitter now. Like we've been texting, like we really connected because I had that experience of being to her home country, which so few people have, right? I remember I was in Cancun one time and I was just getting a drink at the swim up bar, and there was this pretty belligerent, loud guy. And I said something because he was just being a dick to everybody. And he was kind of like, had like a Russian accent. And he said something, and I was like, where are you from anyway, man? And he's like, Belarus. And I'm like, oh, no way, I've been there. And he's like calling me out. He's like, you Americans, you always think you know where everything is. He goes, what's the capital? And I couldn't remember the capital, but I remembered how I got there. And so I was like, well, I don't remember the name of the capital, but we flew into Latvia, and then I drove down to Lithuania, and then we drove into Poland after. And he's like, oh, you have been to my side. I was like, we became like homies, right? And all of a sudden he's just like, I got to control him under control at the pool because me and him got talking about his country and all this other stuff. Anyway, and so my point of all this is like versatility, man. Like some things might seem like they just like, why would I be interested in this? But put yourself out there and learn new things, new hobbies. Try stuff that you're going to suck at. Like really put yourself out there. Be willing to suck at some things and learn an instrument and travel by yourself and just do these different things that'll really help you just learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable as much as anything.
Yeah, it is. I always say I love saying yes to something, not knowing how it's going to work out, taking on more than I can handle, and then figuring it out after. Because when we get to the end of our lives, we're going to wish that we did more, not that we wish that we did less. Or the things that we failed at are never really the things that we regret, but it's the things that we never even attempted or tried to do. And I think that's a big part of probably your first book. I think that resonates most with. But from the beginning of your career and going through real estate, trying to prove yourself in some way through external accomplishments, is there something that you believed at the beginning of your career that you no longer believe in?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, I used to think that, here's a really good one. I used to think that I needed to always be busy. I thought I would listen to books on double speed. I would always be doing something. And the truth is, man, is I was dead wrong. Like more is not better. Slowing down and letting silence, solace, and solitude. You don't want to be alone, but you want to be in solitude. It's very different. You know, there's a difference between lonely and in silence and peace and all those kinds of things. But giving space for God to just speak to you, man, for the universe to talk to you, whatever you believe. But like slowing down, yeah. I was always in such a hurry, and I was always racing, and I'm like, who am I racing against? Like, there's no time frame on this shit. So I think the one thing, the lie that I always told myself was that I needed to do more and read more and study more and do, you know, and now I literally from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., it's my time, bro. I go for a walk for the first 40 minutes of the day, and then I do a stretching routine, and then I read and study. I mean, dude, I got my notes every single day. This was today's study, and I do it literally every single day, just notes of study for myself. And then I do some breath work, meditation stuff. I usually do my cold plunge the days I'm not being a bitch. And then I kind of go into my gratitudes and all the things. And then, you know, even after that, I go to the gym usually midday, like I just did today, and learning to slow everything down. Now, there's a time to grind and work your ass off. I'm financially in a place where I can now do this. Mm-hmm. You know, if I was broke, I'd be in the office at 7:45 and on the phones from 8 to 2. But like, my point is like, you know, there's seasons to your life. You're not chasing anybody or anything. Like, you're not behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. But more than anything, slow down and, you know, give some space for the world to talk to you, the universe to speak a little.
Yeah, I've definitely struggled with that. I think a lot of people do. The habit
it's
that
a big lie we've been sold in America, man. Take time. Go sit outside and just stare at nature. I go into nature a couple times a week for over an hour, and I'll just sit, no phone. Go for a hike for a few hours without my phone. If I ever die without my phone, it'll be because I got lost, because I don't take my phone hiking with me. And like, there's been once or twice I'm like, oh shit, I don't know how to get back. But like, the point is, man, is like, that's where you really find peace. And I think that's the thing that I would teach the younger generation.
Yeah, my habit has been every single morning after I eat breakfast, I go on a walk without headphones, no phone, no nothing, and just that practice in itself is like it grounds you in a way. I know plant medicine has been something that you've led into a little bit. How has that kind of helped you find more solace?
For the say that one more time.
How has plant medicine helped you?
You know, it's interesting. Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying. It's one of those topics that I hesitate to speak too much on because it does have a shadow side.
Yeah.
And so I don't really speak a whole lot about it now. I think that, you know, I first discovered plant medicine about 5.5 years ago, and it completely changed my life. It did. But I've also seen it destroy a lot of people's lives. And so what I tell people more so now is like meditation and breath work and things like that. Now, if you have trauma and things like that, then absolutely plant medicine is the best thing to help you, whether it's ibogaine or mushrooms or MDMA therapy. Some of these things are you know, huge. But at the end of the day, I think that everybody has to do their own research and figure those out. But it's one of those things that, you know, you got to make sure you take serious if you're doing it. But you're opening up a portion of your brain and of the universe itself that like has been closed previously. And there's a lot of integration and coaching that needs to come with that, or else it leaves you in a, because it's going to show you your shit. It's going to show you, you know, what's going on in the background of your brain that you maybe weren't aware of. But what you are able to do with that is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, it is. It's a touchy subject, but there's one last question I ask every guest. I know we're running short on time. My question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
What belief am I currently unlearning? I think, you know, I think growing up in the household that I grew up in a religious community, and, you know, there's a lot of shame that comes with like just different ways you think about life and the things that we do and stuff like that. And I think I've been in a constant battle to rewire, you know, what it means to fail, what it means to fall short of what you're trying to do, what it means to maybe do things that quote unquote, you know, bad or not good for you. And so trying to change the relationship with myself and give a lot more self-love and not so much going back to like maybe shame. I think that's one.
I love it. All your links and everything for your books and socials will be in the show notes below. But is there anywhere you'd like to direct people?
Yeah, Mr. Jimmy Rex. That's my Instagram. That's where I post everything that I'm doing. Anytime I come up with a new podcast or I have something, an event or my coaching program. And if you're a guy and you're listening to this, and you're like, this sounds like kind of stuff I've been looking for. Give us a shot, man. I promise you won't regret it. But we have an amazing community of people that are like-minded, and that I think it'll change your life if you dive into it. I know it will. And so that's where I would direct people, is Mr. Jimmy Rex. And then all the links are there in my bio.
Beautiful. Thank you,
James.